Hello and welcome to Remote Learning 101 webinar for summer 2020. If you are unable to join us with the first session, we hope this recording helps you gain some insight into ways to make remote learning a little more effective and that you're a little more comfortable with it. So let's get started. I'm Stella Seifer, and I am a STEM teacher currently, grades K-5, and an ed tech coach with the NEA. I'm very excited to share my knowledge of remote learning and some technology skills that will help you become a little more comfortable as we move into the fall, whether that's online or face-to-face. My colleague Jan Parker will introduce herself in just a little bit. When we all jumped in March, we know things were a little bit chaotic. I know this is what many of my parents felt like. Just give you a moment to read. When we did the session live last month, we had our participants take a quick snapshot so that we had an idea of who was sitting in front of us for that. Rather than use the form snapshot this time, we're going to take a quick look at the results, which is going to give you a chance to see how you're feeling and how you fit in. So you can see that we have a wide variety of teachers. So wherever you are, you're in the right place, whether you are pre-K teacher or all the way up into high school. There is something in this session for you. We notice that the majority of teachers are general education teachers, but there are some very specific skill sets that are involved with all of these other content areas. Most of our students are using either laptops or Chromebooks. So although a lot of tools are agnostic as far as which device it can go onto, we're going to be kind of leaning towards Chromebooks, and Google Classroom, you can see, is a big deal. So hopefully we can answer some of those questions, whether you're using Google or Zoom, Google Classroom, or one of the other LMSs. And this is just a very interesting bit of information. How do you feel? Seems to me like everybody, there again, is all over the place. So wherever you are in the right place. Our goal is that you're going to walk away today with a little confidence in what you have been already doing and some skills to help that next round of teaching better for you and your students. So this is our agenda for the webinar. What is remote learning? Some of the foundational needs just to plan for effective remote learning. Thinking about how you can create a system that works for you. Every one of our classrooms are different. So what do you need to make your classroom more effective? What tools do you need to design lessons? And what tools are you curious about or do you think would be most effective so that you have a few weeks coming up, you can start exploring them. And we'll have an opportunity for reflection. Abraham Lincoln once said, if I had 6 hours to chop down a tree, I'd spend the first 4 hours sharpening the axe. This particular quote really resonated with me with this summer because we don't know what kind of a tree we're going to be chopping down in the fall, but this summer is our opportunity to really sharpen our axe, hone our skills, and be prepared. So what can we do this summer? We realize that you are in the center of, there's certain things you can control and certain things you can influence and certain things that are beyond all of that. So what can you do? We know you can plan for teaching, whether that teaching is online, hybrid, or completely remote. You can spend this summer learning a new skill, choosing and or creating some new videos that you'll be using in your class. And we'll go over a little bit how to do that. Concentrate on staying healthy and trying out some different approaches. We don't know all the answers, but these are the things that are within your control to make this fall even better. So let's take a look at remote learning. What is remote learning? Well, it might happen in two different ways. One way is asynchronous, which can happen anywhere. Some students, I'm sure you've done this before, you've taken a class, you access the information, and you work on it at your own speed, in your own time. Synchronous is what we do when we are together online. We can collaborate, although you can collaborate in both synchronous and asynchronous manners. We're going to be thinking about ways that you can collaborate with students when their classroom is going to be different. What can they collaborate on, even if they can't be within a few inches of each other? So whether your class is asynchronous or synchronous, it is both. Both of those are types of online remote learning. So we're going to go over some steps. We've kind of broken down planning for remote learning into 3 chunks. One is to analyze, then plan, and then implement. It's really, really tempting to jump right in and think about all of the lessons you know are wonderful and how can you do them online. But to be an effective remote learner and a remote teacher, you need to take a step back and think about what we need to do to make it more effective. So we're going to spend a little time in analyzing, then planning before we even get to implementing. Analyze. What do we know already, and how will you move forward? What is that current reality when students are coming back? Thinking about remote learning, will your students have access? What type of tools and skills do they have? Students and you have social emotional needs. How can you build and maintain those relationships? And what are your specific needs of your students? You're going to take a few minutes and write down this information. Really think about it rather than jumping into lesson planning. What do you already know? What do you know how to do well? Do you know how to run Google Classroom? Do you know how to do screencasts? And what tools do you need to learn? Thinking about who you can ask for help and where you can find resources. So first thing I want to do is I'm going to take you to this website. It's Wide Open Schools. And I want you to realize you do not have to know everything today. This is a curated website with lots of resources. So we're going to take just a second and look through. You are an educator, and whatever your grade is, let's say you're a middle school teacher, you can go right in and look for digital citizenship, English language arts, virtual field trips. These have all been curated. They've all been looked at through common sense. They've been vetted for applicability and that the links are working. You don't have to go and look for yourself. You can spend hours just looking through here. What tools are you curious about? It's really easy to get sucked into a rabbit hole of tools. So bring you back to this Wide Open Schools website that will allow you to look. Write this down. What are the non-negotiable expectations of you from your school district? Are they telling you which tools to use, how many minutes to meet, and what curriculum to use? And if not, what do you need to take care of? Once you've written down all of this stuff, find yourself a thought partner. Take an hour to write down these questions. And if you have a thought partner, maybe a teammate, and think about how you can organize your findings. Everyone has their own way of thinking about analyzing a situation. So I've just brought 3 to you. One is a SWO2 analysis, or graphic organizers of your choice, or maybe just sticky notes. So let's take a look. If you're this type of person, this is an SWOT. You look at the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. What are the dangers or your roadblocks to be able to do this, and how might you approach them? What are your weaknesses or areas that you can begin to develop? What opportunities do you have? Maybe you're a graphic organizer guru, and you might have some that you might show your students to help them think through a problem. If you have a favorite graphic organizer or a mind map that might help you think about your current reality, use that. Or, this is kind of my style, just some sticky notes. Start writing down all of those questions that you have, and then start organizing it. Once you have the information down, it's a lot easier to tackle the problem. So once you've taken enough time to analyze your reality, an hour or so, it's time to begin to plan your system. How will your system work? So think about these approaches. What do you need to do with your students? You have to communicate with them. And I've just listed a few possible tools that you might know, or you might be already using, or you might have heard about. You will need to deliver instruction. You can do Zoom meets or screencasts or videos of yourself. You'll need to collect assignments. You need to support collaboration. You're going to need to answer questions, and you're going to need to provide feedback. So which tools are you going to use to do each one of these parts of your lesson? Then you're going to start designing that system. Once you have a system designed, it's a lot easier to see how the whole thing fits together. Make sure that you understand when and where you're going to answer questions. What are your office hours? And thinking about this, use the fewest number of tools you can. You do not need to learn 25 tools. Find the fewest number of tools. If Google Classroom works for you to be efficient, then do Google Classroom. If you use Seesaw or Canva, another LMS, whatever that is, use the fewest number of tools. Give yourself permission to make mistakes, and your students too. It's really important. Create norms for the virtual environment. Build on what is already working in your classroom. When you're looking at, this is a possible plan over 3 weeks. And remember that if you are, whether you are virtual, remote learning, or face-to-face, this is very similar to what you would do. You don't jump into everything in the very first week of school. So if you notice, students, you have to be thinking of their technology skills. What are you going to have to teach them? How are you going to connect with them? How are you going to deliver content and have students interact with content? And what types of assignments might you do? So this is a possible growth chart where we have the first week, you're only focusing on the how with very low level one reading or a math assignment, model how to do it using a screencast. During week 2, you might add in a little bit like Google Slides, some small group reading during your office hours. By week 3, you can begin to release some of that support and have students start using HyperDocs, can bring in some scavenger hunts, or even using some HyperDocs so that students can do some choice science. So these are some examples of a system that you might set up. In this case, in brick and mortar, you would be doing some instruction and having students practice. Through remote learning, you might use docs or slides to give your instruction, could be videos, and you would have specific websites or assignments for practice. Formative feedback, you would actually be talking to your students in brick and mortar, but through remote learning, you can use Google Forms, and you can even do quizzes that instantly grade, and we'll look at all these in a few minutes. Mini lessons, using screencasts, doing Screencastify, so you can show your students what it is they're going to be doing. Small group, you can use Google Meets and Google Classroom, or do not underestimate the value of having your own website. So let's take a quick look at some of these. So if you want to do your assignments using a Google Doc, this is more of a high school where there is an assignment and it keeps going down through all of their work. And this particular teacher has done an entire week's worth of learning. For younger children, you could even do Google Slides and make them interactive. Students can move pictures around and have them type right on. Oops. Okay. For instance, you have every day you'd be going right through the lesson, where you have videos that students can watch, things that they can do, activities. So this would be using a Google Slide. Google Forms, and you can do Google Forms to just teach or give the instant feedback. So as students answer the questions, they will get their answers.
All right, so you've done your designing, you've done your planning. What's next? Implementation, getting ready to teach. One of the first things you want to think about when you're getting ready is all of the different ways you will share your system and all of the different systems that you have to share. So you're going to share your workflow with students, where they'll find information. You need to share a schedule with students and with parents, and be sure to set those boundaries for a healthy life, for not only for you, but also for your students. School shouldn't be a 24/7 endeavor, and just like in an in-person environment, there's a bell schedule and there are times that you're available and there are times that you are not. That should be the exact same on this online environment. It's easy to get sucked in to sitting back down at your laptop at 7:30 in the evening and working for 3 more hours answering emails, but be sure to set those boundaries. If that's a time that you've set aside to do that, great. But if it's not, let it wait until the next day. Be sure that students know where to find help for the tools that you'll be using, whether it's a vendor's website or a school website that will help students use whatever tools it is that you're using. And that's handy for parents too, because particularly the parents of younger students, they need to understand how to use the tool so that they can help their students use the tool. Also share norms or build them online with your students so that everyone understands in your system how things will work. Something to keep in mind is that it's not a one-to-one transition of in-person learning versus remote learning. Things are different when you're doing remote learning. Besides the obvious of location, not everything translates. Just a short example, a teacher can scan a room in 10 to 15 seconds and see which of the 26 students are having trouble getting started with their work. That's just not something that you can do in 10 to 15 seconds in a remote environment. So don't try to always find, well, I do this way in person, so now I'm going to use this EdTech tool and do it this way online. We will have to think about learning a bit differently when we think about remote learning, and one of the first things we have to do is let go of that idea that it's exactly the same, it's just digital. It's not. Consider building a website. That's one great way to help students with access to any type of learning that you're doing. But if you're using an LMS like Google Classroom or Schoology or Canvas or Blackboard or any other type LMS, that could also serve as the website for student access. Again, set your office hours and stick with them. Be super clear with directions. Consider learning how to make screencast videos. What you're watching right now, we're calling it a webinar, of course, but it's a screencast video. It's a video of my computer screen with my voice being recorded as I work through this presentation. It's a great way to show instructions for students. It's a great way to create tutorial videos for kids solving a math problem or whatever else. So consider those, because students can go back to them over and over again, pause them, back them up, re-listen to them. And it's a great tool for remote learning. If you look at the bottom, if you're on the slideshow itself and you look at the very bottom slide of this slide, it's slide number 23, you'll see there's a link to a planning template. You may find that that's helpful for you as well. So when thinking about learning activities, keep in mind the references down at the bottom of this screen. And some states may have more specific guidelines than these, but these are general guidelines curated from education professionals, educational psychologists, about how much time we should be asking students to be doing that deep learning on a computer screen type work. I know all of the times on here are much less than a regular school day, but consider that a regular school day also has a lot of transitions in them, whether it's an elementary classroom transitioning to the carpet for a whole group lesson, or whether it's elbow partners discussing a project, or transitioning to the cafeteria for lunch. Certainly I'm not calling those wasted times. In fact, it's part of what makes in-person learning so valuable for students, right? The social aspects of that type of interaction cannot really be a one-to-one replacement in a remote environment. So when we're thinking about a remote environment, let's think about how we can get the most powerful learning experiences in front of our students, but within a reasonable time frame. Consider one way to do this would be to use some of the flipped learning concepts that are discussed in this video here. And you could search for flipped learning, just do a quick internet search for it and find a lot of information. Essentially what it is there's a reading or a video or something that students do before they talk with their teacher about it. Before the teacher addresses the learning, the students come preloaded, so to speak, after having read or done the video before class. You can use this in in-person learning, you can use it in remote learning, and then you can use your face-to-face times with students, whether that's face-to-face in person or face-to-face in a Zoom or a Google Meet, to process what they learn and have students discuss what they think about whatever the video was about. That allows students to have some asynchronous time to watch the video, which is super important in so many of our households with students who are going to be caring for younger students who may be limited in the number of devices in the home. So it allows students access to that learning when they can access it. And then when they come to your synchronous meeting time, they can process what they saw and learned in the video. Also, talk with your teammates, talk with the teachers that you teach with about digital citizenship and internet safety and how you want to approach that with your students. On slide 26 of this presentation, all of those are links to wonderful online resources to teach and support digital citizenship. The Common Sense Media, for instance, has by grade band all kinds of digital citizenship and internet safety lessons that are ready for you to use straight out of the box. The lesson plan is there, the multimedia tools are there for you to share with students. Activities, even if you were in person, worksheets that you could print out online, things that you could post online in your learning management system. They're all there. They're fabulous tools. But with all of this remote learning, it's super important that our students understand how to both be safe on the internet and what it means to be a good citizen online. When you're talking about this remote environment versus in person, there are things that do transfer one-to-one, right? So thinking about what has already worked in your classroom, how can you make some of those discussions that you have work in a remote environment? You can communicate with your students using Remind or Talking Points, which are two separate apps that allow you to communicate with students without them having access to your phone number. Of course, that would be the same as communicating with the parents. You can block your phone number, or you can use a Google Voice number. So if you get any Gmail account, you can get a free Google Voice number, and that number you can hand out to parents and to students. It doesn't give them your real phone number, but it does forward to your mobile phone. So it allows people to be able to contact you, and you can see if it's coming from your Google Voice number on your phone. So again, that's setting boundaries and not answering your phone for school things at 10 o'clock at night. This would be one of those times that you could do that. I want to encourage you again to use a Google Classroom or build a website or whatever else you have used, like Canvas or Schoology, to keep all of the information about your class so that when you receive questions about where do I find this, you can consistently send your students and parents back to one place. And of course, practice. You want to give yourself some grace when you're practicing using these new tools. You will make mistakes just like students will make mistakes, and the only way that you can learn really to use these tools is to make mistakes with them and do better the next time. So practice using them. Don't be afraid of them. Let's look at a few tips here. If you want to think about community building, how you can community build remotely versus how you would community build in person. Think about connection meetings with activities like scavenger hunts or show and tell, or have discussions or read alouds. When you're talking about promoting effective communication in person, set the norms like you would set them in the classroom. Some norms you probably want to think about is muting microphones in these meets and unmuting them when it's time to talk, and having students practice that. It's good practice to have students have their cameras on so that you can quickly go back and look just to make sure everybody's still with you. Again, that's that whole I can scan a room in 10 to 15 seconds if I'm in person. It's a little more difficult to do that remotely. set rules that chat is not for casual conversation, but just for about whatever's being talked about in your meeting. You can use breakout rooms in Zoom for peer-to-peer collaboration. And coming soon to Google Meet is also breakout rooms. On this slide, slide 28, you'll see that link, updates coming to Google Meet. Take a look at that if you're a Google school district. There's several updates coming to Meet that teachers were begging for in the spring, including breakout rooms, but also the ability to mute an entire Meet and some other features like that. Collaborative workspaces, whether you're using Google Docs or Office 365, have students collaborate on documents. So I want to share the next couple of slides with you are some resources that you can use to help you if you are a Google district. Follow the link shown here on this slide, teachfromhome.google. All kinds of helpful information about how to use the Google tools. And then on the next slide, if you're not a Google district but you're looking for Microsoft tools, I have two resources for you. The first one is actually a page on Holly Clark's blog that talks about how to infuse your classroom with the Microsoft tools. She's an educational leader. She's has a great blog. For those of you that are Google, she doesn't leave y'all out either. You could follow that link, get to her blog, and then she has a whole page on infusing your classroom with Google tools too. So, but that's one. And then of course you can also, Microsoft folks, you can go straight to the source. The second link on here is Microsoft's resources for remote learning. On this page, we've included some links to some tools that are a little more platform agnostic. It doesn't really matter, other than the first one about Google Classroom and Google Suite. It doesn't really matter whether you're using Google tools or you're using Microsoft or something else other than those two things. We spoke a little bit going across the top about Remind and Talking Points already. Those are communication apps. Zoom is a meeting app. Seesaw is an LMS for younger students. It allows easy communication with parents. Parents can see the work that their students are doing. So if you teach, typically, I'm not saying it's only for, but typically Seesaw is used for pre-K and K through grade 2, 3, 4. Certainly there are older elementary school teachers and even middle school teachers using Seesaw, but it's especially powerful for the littles. Digital citizenship, a couple of links there we've talked about already. There's Screencastify, which is a link to a free Chrome extension to let you make screencast videos and some tutorials on how to do that. The next two are whiteboard apps. They're digital online whiteboards that you can share with your students in a Google Meet or a Zoom meeting, where students can write on the whiteboard, quote unquote, just like they would in class. And then across the bottom, Padlet, Flipgrid, Edpuzzle, and HyperDocs. Padlet is like a digital bulletin board. It allows for curation of work. Students can have their own account and build timelines and include video and photos and text. And, Flipgrid is for video discussions and so much more. It's really a very powerful tool for students to practice their fluency, to do their thinking with video, to respond to other students and their thinking. Edpuzzle is a service that will allow you to embed questions and check for understanding into any video, including videos there on YouTube. You do not have to own the video. It also strips out ads and that next video link from YouTube. It does a whole lot more than that. If you use video in your classes, I highly encourage you to take a look at Edpuzzle because it'll do a lot. And even for those of you that teach in districts where YouTube is blocked, Edpuzzle has a way for you to whitelist Edpuzzle, and you can show YouTube videos through Edpuzzle with just a little bit of help from your IT department in whitelisting the Edpuzzle URL. So I encourage you to look at that. And then HyperDocs is an hour-long webinar in itself, but in the shortest time possible, It's digital lessons that allow for multimedia and allow students to explore issues more widely than a digital worksheet would allow them to explore them. Follow that link and you'll see tons of examples. One of the cool things I think about HyperDocs, and I guess now I'm going to preach a little bit, is HyperDocs, if you create one well, you could create a HyperDoc for a week long lesson for a student, and then you've created the HyperDoc and then the student does the work. They do the creation of the presentation and link it back in. They do the going out and watching the videos and responding to those videos and thinking about them. Just a really powerful practice, whether you're in person or remote, but particularly in a remote environment where time is of the essence. I think you'll find HyperDocs might be a great tool in your quiver. Everything on here is COPA, SIPA, and FERPA compliant, but depending on your district, you still might want to check with your IT department about how you would use them. Short little ad for you, I guess, about micro-credentials. On this slide in the slideshow is a link to the NEA micro-credentials, some of which are about using technology to create engaging learning experiences, but some of them are on classroom management and focus kind of on the in-person. Some are about leadership and education or working with English language learners. Just tons of great competency-based recognition here for you, and I highly encourage you to take a look and get the recognition that you deserve for things that you want to learn about and demonstrate mastery in. On this slide, we've left this Flipgrid up and running. You'll have to, of course, get to it on slide number 33 in the Google slide presentation, but it's a chance for you to try out one of the tools that we spoke about a moment ago called Flipgrid. And you get a chance to see how easy it is to just click a button and record yourself thinking. You might be shy about getting recorded via video. I know I am. It's not my favorite thing. But one of the cool things about Flipgrid is it has all kinds of filters and emojis that you can lay over your video to kind of ease that discomfort. Some kids like to use the emojis. Some kids do not. Some kids get on there and they think they're the next YouTuber, right? They're going to be famous. So leverage that with your students, because the excitement that they have in recording themselves and recording their thoughts is a powerful thing in a classroom. And that's it. Appreciate you getting through this webinar with us, doing the deep thinking that it's going to take to make remote learning as powerful as we can. If you have any questions, you can reach out to Stella at her Twitter handle or at her email address listed here, or you can reach out to me at my Twitter handle or that email address, jan@dynamicteaching.net. I know I'm speaking for myself, but I know I can speak for Stella here too. We would love to help you in any way that we can make this a better experience for all. So once again, thank you, and I hope you found this webinar useful.